So, we're going to speak about, today we're going to speak about shifting from Chorban to Chibur, from Gola to Geula. And what we're going to focus on, how in these words, and a couple other words that we're going to bring up throughout the Shir, we have the deeper meaning of what we are trying to achieve during this time period, this year and every year, and what are the key lessons that we can find in these words. What are the key shifts in our attitude, in our belief systems, in the way that we live our life that are going to really bring us and connect us to the Geula that we're seeking. The Gola, the exile that we are experiencing, is something that we experience the whole year. But during these days, we experience and we remember it much more. Because, and this is a point that many times we don't recognize, there is a tremendous opportunity and tremendous potential, specifically during these days every year, to reconnect to the Geula and to merit the Geula. And to a point where some of the great Hasidic Rebbes, like the Ohev Yisrael, said that the 21 days of Yemei Ben HaMeitzarim, of these days between Shivasar B'Tammuz and Tisha B'Av, are corresponding the 21 days that we have of Chagim throughout the year. The days of Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot, and Rosh Hashanah. All these days are also 21 days. And so these are the source for those 21 days, and there's a huge potential in these days to connect to something much greater and much deeper. And that's why every year when we cry during this time period, we are crying for that potential that seems to not have been yet used and manifested and actualized. And so what we're going to speak about today is how to on a personal level and collectively, make that shift and really take advantage of this tremendous potential. And so the first part of this year, let's speak about the shift from Chorban to Chibur. From Chorban meaning from destruction, and Chibur means a reconnection, a oneness, a wholeness. And what this means is that if we recognize, we're going to bring a few examples of this throughout the Shir, how there are words that sound very familiar, two words that sound very familiar, and just by rearranging the letters in the word, it can have a completely different meaning, it can have the complete opposite meaning. And when the letters in the words are arranged in the right way, in the proper way, then they represent life, they represent light, they represent success and happiness, they represent holiness, they represent godliness, elokuts, and all of the blessings that we are seeking. But when the letters in the words, the same word, when they are arranged in a different way, they represent just the opposite. And so one of these examples is Chorban. Chorban means destruction. And what does destruction mean? In order to understand what destruction means, so we can look in the word and see what is, just by changing around these letters in a different order, we can see what is the opposite of Chorban. The opposite of Chorban are what the letters Chibur represent. Chibur is when all the different parts are working together harmoniously in one system. It's the opposite of fragmentation. It's when all the many parts in a system, let's say all the people in the world or all the parts of the universe, are working in a harmony with one another in order to bring about a certain goal, a certain potential to be actualized, and that's called Chibur. And so the opposite of Chibur, the opposite of that harmony, of that peace, of everyone and everything working together as one, is Chorban, is destruction. That's what destruction is. It's when there is this element that unites all the parts, has left, is no longer here, and then the parts just fall away. It's when the soul leaves the body, and when the soul leaves the body just falls apart. And when a person is sick, on some level, there's a certain a way of holiness, a certain way of the neshama that is supposed to unify all the parts in this system that's called the physical body and make everything work harmoniously. And now that is lacking, that is weakened. And that's what causes sicknesses in the person. And so this is really, this destruction, this chorban, happens in multiple levels, multi-dimensions at the same time. And it's all about when the soul, which is the aspect that unites all the parts, is no longer there or is weakened. And Am Yisrael as well, Am Yisrael are supposed to be the soul of the world. We are supposed to unify the whole world under Hashem. Rashi explains in the pasuk of Shema Yisrael in the Torah, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. How does Rashi explain what is the simple meaning of this pasuk that we say every day? Shema Yisrael, listen Yisrael, Hashem, Shehu Achshav Elokeinu, Hashem that is now recognized only by us as God, our God, Hashem Echad, will eventually become recognized by the whole world that the God of the Jews is God, is the creator of the whole universe, and he runs everything. And so, as the Rambam also says, when the Rambam is describing what will be in the time of the Mashiach, he explains that the world will come to recognize that the God of the Jews, who gave the Torah to the Jews on Har Sinai, that he is the creator of the universe, and that he is the one leader, the only force in all of existence, and everything exists because of him. And so the world is supposed to come to recognition of Hashem through Am Yisrael. And so Am Yisrael, they are the soul of the world. They are the soul of the nations. They are supposed to be the soul of the world, the soul of the nations. And when there is a lack in that, so then all of the nations and the whole world falls apart. And when there's a lack in Am Yisrael, the soul of Am Yisrael are the tzaddikim of Am Yisrael, and it's the Bet Hamikdash, it's the revelation of the Shekhinah dwelling among us. And when that is lacking, when that's concealed, as well, Am Yisrael falls apart. And so we need to understand how to make that shift from chorban to chibur. So if what causes chorban, we said destruction is the separateness, the fragmentation of all the parts. That's because the soul is no longer there. The soul is concealed. The godliness is concealed. So in order to reunify everyone and reunify all the parts back into that system that is working coherently, harmoniously, right? We need to bring back that soul. We need to bring the revelation of the neshama, of the godliness. And the Baal Shem Tov taught that this needs to be done in 3 levels. There are 3 levels that we should focus on this goal. The Baal Shem Tov taught that if a person develops his love in 3 ways, in 3 aspects, that will include the complete tikkun of a person's neshama in this lifetime, and that will bring a person to all the greatest spiritual levels and spiritual experiences of the tzaddikim in the past generation. What are these 3 loves that the Baal Shem Tov taught that we should focus on developing every day more and more? As the love Ahavat Yisrael, loving every Jew like ourselves. Ahavat Torah v'mitzvot, loving the Torah and Hashem's mitzvot. V'ahavat Hashem, and loving Hashem. And so not only do we need to focus on all these 3 things separately and how are we holding in each one of these 3 things, but the Baal Shem Tov taught that these are all paralleling one another. And the way, the definition or the explanation of loving Hashem is found in the extent that we are loving the Torah and the mitzvot, and the extent that we are loving every Jew. And if we are lacking in our Ahavat Yisrael, if we are lacking in the love that we have for the Torah and the mitzvot, then that means that there is a lack in our loving of Hashem. And the same goes true with the other 2. With Ahavat Torah. If you love the Torah, you say you love the Torah, but you're not loving every Jew, then there's a lack in your loving of the Torah. If you say you love the Torah, but you don't feel the more that you learn Torah, the more that your love for Hashem is increased, then there's a lack in your ahavat Torah. The loving of the Torah is not real, it's not genuine, it's not for the right reasons, with the right intentions. And if a person says they love every Jew, but they don't really connect to the Torah and the mitzvot, or they love every Jew, but they don't really connect to Hashem, then that love is also not genuine, it's not real. There are a lot of other side reasons from the ego and other things that we don't need to get into right now that may be involved, that a person is fooling themselves, or the person is fooled into thinking that they love every Jew, but it needs to be shown and represented in all these three dimensions in order for it to be genuine, in order for it to be true. And so the next point we want to speak about is the aspect of making the shift from gola to geula. Gola means exile, and geula, we all know, means the redemption that we are looking for, that we are seeking every day, we're awaiting. And here too, we see that in the letters of the word gola and geula, they are very similar. We can understand how we can make this shift. Gola and geula are identical except for that geula has the letter Aleph. Gola is missing the Aleph, geula has the letter Aleph. And so what does this letter Aleph represent? So very, very interesting. Another secret that we see here in this word. Gola has the numerical value. Gola, meaning exile, has the numerical value of 44, which is the gematria, the numerical value of dam, blood. And geula, redemption, has the numerical value of 45, which is the numerical value of Adam. The gematria of Adam, man, is geula, redemption, whereas gola, exile, is dam. Now, what's the difference between dam and Adam? Again, just the Aleph, just one letter. And the Baal Shem Tov explains that man is called Adam because man is made of two parts. Man is made of basar v'dam, is made of the chomer, is made out of the physical aspects, what's called the arba yesodot, the four elements that Hashem put together in certain combinations, and that's what the whole world is made of. What are these four elements? Fire, wind, water, and earth. Mankind is also made of these four elements. But there is a fifth element, and that's the soul, and that goes inside the body of the person, inside this combination of the four elements, and it combines all of them into a working system that works harmoniously, full of health and full of joy. And the same thing in the world. The world is made up of these four elements, and the soul, the godliness that called the Shekhinah, that dwells in the physicality of the world, is what gives it life. If Hashem removed himself from the universe for a moment, it would cease to exist. What's holding everything together and creating everything in each moment, from nothing to being, from nothingness to beingness, is the godliness, is Hashem. And so Adam is called Adam, Aleph, and Dam. Dam is the physical part, the blood, the physical elements, and Aleph represents the godliness. Aleph represents the godliness, as the Baal Shem Tov explains. Aleph is Alufo Shel Olam. Alufo Shel Olam means the chief or the master of the world. And so Aleph sounds like Alufo Shel Olam, Aleph Alufo, and Aleph together, the combination of Aleph with Dam, is Hashem's light that gives life to the Dam, to the physicality of the physical body, the four elements. And the difference between Gola, exile, and Geula, redemption, is this Aleph, meaning that the experience of exile is the experience of the four elements, the parts of the physicality, the physical world, the parts of the physical life, the parts of the physical body being experienced as a separate being from the godliness. In a perfect world, in a world of Geula, we must come to experience and shift our experience into feeling and recognizing nothing but godliness, and the four elements, the physical part, is included in that godliness, in that life source, in the neshama, in the soul. And so the Baal Shem Tov explained, and he gave a meditation, and this is the first meditation we're going to explain in the class today. We're going to try to do the meditations very briefly so that you get a taste for it, and then afterwards, after the shiur, you can come back to it and practice it on your own time. And so the first meditation we're going to bring here now is a very powerful meditation the Baal Shem Tov taught many, many times, because we see it brought by all of his Talmidim in many ways. The disciples of the Baal Shem Tov quote him on this meditation in many different ways and in many, many different places. So this was very, very powerful. If the Baal Shem Tov found the need to repeat it so many times, and all of his Talmidim repeated it and brought it in many places. And the Baal Shem Tov taught that when we come to a deep inner awareness, a deep inner recognition, that wherever we are standing right now, whatever we are experiencing in the moment, every movement that we are recognizing, paying attention to, is filled with Alufo Shel Olam, is filled with the Master of the Universe. And everything that happens, every detail that is happening around us, everything that we see, everything that we hear, and everything that we feel, every breath that we are taking, and every heartbeat that we might come to sense, all of this is nothing but Hashem, the soul that is making everything move constantly. The Baal Shem Tov says that when we focus in this way, and we put our awareness on this, he says these magic words. He says, Yitparedu kol po'ale avin. All the doers of evil will be separated. Okay? And that means that any distress that a person is experiencing, any adversity, any pain, any suffering, any judgment energy, dinim, kitrugim, right? Any of the persecuting angels, any persecutions physically, spiritually, any tzarot, any constricted energy, any troubles that a person is going through will fall away when a person focuses their attention and their awareness on the truth that every movement and everything that is happening, every detail of everything that I can sense, is nothing but Alufo Shel Olam. But why does the Baal Shem Tov use this word Yitparedu kol po'ale avin? All of the doers of evil will be separated. And here lies a very, very deep secret about really what exile is all about. And exile is all about when the forces of evil, the forces of darkness, the forces of concealment, all of the negativity, when they steal away, they steal all of the blessings that we have in our life. That means when we cease to appreciate the blessings in our life, or we lack in our appreciation of all of the blessings in our life, then that blessing or those blessings are given over to the forces of darkness, to the forces of concealment. When we hide our faces from the blessings in our life by not appreciating them, and not appreciating them enough, not appreciating them truly, deeply, constantly, then that concealment means that those blessings are being given to the place of concealment. They're being given to the forces of concealment, to the forces of darkness. And so in the same way, when is it that there are forces of evil that were together, brought together? Because the Baal Shem Tov implies by saying that the forces of evil, through this meditations, the forces of evil, Yitparedu kol po'ale avin, they will be separated, they will fall apart. What allowed them to be combined and unified as one system, working to cause evil in the world? That's when we lack our appreciation of the wholeness. When we cease to connect to the wholeness that we can experience in each moment. And so that's a very, very deep secret and very important shift and lesson that we can learn about how we can shift from Gola to Geula. Because the difference between exile and redemption, between Gola to Geula, is this Aleph. In when you have the Aleph, when you are in the Golah, in the concealment of exile, and you bring your awareness back to the Aleph, to the Alufo Shel Olam, that itself is what transforms the darkness into light. And where you are sitting, now you are sitting in a place that is only light. Now you are sitting in a place of Geula. And so that's one of the very, very important lessons that we can apply so that we can connect to this Geula energy and we can cause this shift to happen. The next part here we want to speak about is a very important idea that is taught by the Arizal and the Baal Shem Tov and many of the tzaddikim throughout the generations. And this will also help us to understand how these different combinations of letters and different words, how are they relevant. The pasuk, there's a pasuk in Iyov, very famous pasuk that says, "Me'et Hashem lo tetzeh ha'ra'ot." From Hashem, no evil emanates, meaning that any bad and any evil that you see in the world is not from Hashem. What does that mean? It's not from Hashem. Is there someone else in control aside from Hashem? What does that mean? And the explanation and the understanding that is explained, that is taught by the tzaddikim, is that Hashem is constantly radiating His light of life upon us and within us. It's constantly being beamed and shined upon us into our lives and into every aspect, every part of our reality. In fact, reality itself is nothing but an emanation of Hashem's light. So where does evil come from? Where does darkness come from? Where does pain and suffering and lack and deficiencies come from? And the explanation is that there are two parts in our reality. There are the vessels and there are the light, meaning that you have a cup and the cup is filled up with the light, the vessel and the light of Hashem. Now, if this cup was dirty, if this cup was not a proper good cup, so then that would affect also what's in it. And so when the vessels are not aligned with the most beautiful, most wonderful representation of Hashem's light, of Hashem's blessings, then the vessels will experience those blessings. Not only will they not experience it as blessings, but they will experience it as the opposite of blessings. And so this is really just the Kabbalistic way of saying that when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change, right? And that's something that is taught by many, many people today. It's known by many people, but the deeper way that the Torah teaches us is that this is not just a change of your perspective, think positive. Yes, that's included. This is included. Think positive and things will be positive, because when you look at things with a positive way, then the light will be experienced as it is in source. It will be experienced in that blessing, in that form of blessing that Hashem wants to give us. But it's a lot more than that. And the Torah is teaching us that when we want to experience greater levels of light and greater levels of blessings, so that it's not only temporary, so that that light can be experienced forever and ever, for all of eternity. And so that we can experience that light for all of eternity being increased exponentially. Imagine for a moment if all the blessings and all the pleasures of this physical world were included into one moment, not a second, less than a second, not even a millisecond, a moment. And that level of blessing and that level of pleasure and joy were just multiplied and just increased exponentially from moment to moment. And every moment was just a multiplication, times each other, right? To the power of, right? Exponentially of everything that was beforehand. And that was for all of eternity. And so that's something that is mind-boggling. You can't even begin to understand what that means. And the only way that we can get to that level of essence of living, life in its source, in the infinite source of all good, is only if we prepare the vessels constantly in a specific way so that those vessels can experience that light in the sweetest, most wonderful way that is constantly increasing. More and more light, greater and greater pleasure, more and more pleasantness. And the way that the Torah teaches us that is through the Torah and mitzvot. When we follow the Torah and the mitzvot, b'machshava, b'dibur, b'maaseh, in our thoughts, in our belief systems, in our attitudes, in our thinking, in our words, the way we speak, and in our actions, staying away from the negative and pursuing the positive, then that constantly fixes and rectifies and strengthens our vessels to be able to experience that light in more and more light in sweeter and sweeter, greater ways. And so one of the ways that we see this lesson, this idea, this fundamental idea expressed in the Kavanot of the Arizal and in the Baal Shem Tov is that all this light that Hashem is constantly beaming upon us are represented in the 22 letters of the Alef Bet. All of reality, the DNA, the spiritual DNA of reality are the 22 letters of the Alef Bet. And Hashem shines upon us a few letters, and those letters now, we can, based on the way we're living our life, based on our perspective, based on our belief systems, our focus, and our awareness, we can change the order of those letters to be experienced either as blessing, or if a person lives in a disconnected and misaligned way, then they can be organized, those letters can be organized in a representation of the opposite of blessing. And so that's the tremendous power in our prayers. When we daven the Shemona Esrei, and whatever prayers we daven to Hashem, the Tehillim, whatever prayers we daven into Hashem, and we're using the 22 letters of the Alef Bet, and we are combining our heightened emotions with a clear intention of being connected to Hashem and experiencing Hashem, then those letters are organized. And the reality, that means that reality is organized and represented and manifested as blessing. And we experience blessing in a sweet, revealed way. And then the opposite is also understood. And so one of the examples of this is what the Arizal teaches us in Sha'ar Kavanot, where the Arizal gives us the Kavanot of the prayers and the mitzvot and the Chagim. And he explains to us in one of the places in Sha'ar Kavanot the specific Kabbalistic intentions to have in the prayer during these days of Yemei Ben HaMeitzarim, during these days between 17th of Tammuz and Tisha B'Av. And these Kabbalistic intentions are meant to bring us to that shift, to shift from the exile, the experience of exile, to an experience of redemption, and to bring the world as well and all that is connected to us to also experience that shift. And one of the points, I'm not going to get into all of the names of Hashem that he brings, just simply one of the points that we can apply practically is the Arizal reveals to us that one of the shifts that we want to focus on during these days, and he says this in a couple places in the Shemona Esrei, one of them is the bracha of Ritzeh. Ritzeh means we're praying to Hashem to open up His will meaning His favor. And the Arizal says that we want to focus on shifting tzara. Tzara means being confined, and it represents all of the adversity that we have in our life. From tzara to retzeh. From the confined existence, the small, the adversity, when we feel that we have no place to go, no place to run, where we feel that uncomfortable in our own skin or in our own home, where we feel that's exactly what exile is. And the Arizal says that we want to shift that from tzara to retzeh. What does that mean? What does it mean, tzara? So tzara means that like we just explained, it means that I don't have space. I don't have space for myself, and that's why I feel uncomfortable. I feel like I'm not in the right place. I can't be myself. I can't expand and relax. And it also means when a person does not have space in their heart for their fellow brother. When you don't have space in your heart for someone else, it means that you can't stand that person. You can't think of that person. You can't see that person. You don't want to hear anything about that person. There's no space in your heart to hold that person in your reality. And that's the experience of tzara. That's the experience of being confined. It's a confined, constricted energy, and it's an energy of judgment, of dinim. There's a very, very interesting Mishnah in Masechet Avot. Masechet Avot, Perek Hey. Chapter Hey, Mishnah Hey. Chapter Hey, chapter 5, and the 5th Mishnah in that chapter. And the Mishnah tells us, lists for us, 10 miracles that we had constantly in the Bet Hamikdash, in the time of the Bet Hamikdash, and because of the Bet Hamikdash. And at the end of the list, the Mishnah says, the 10th miracle that we had was, Velo amar adam lachavero, tsar li hamakom she'alin b'Yerushalayim. No one ever told his friend, there's no space for me. I feel constrained. I feel like there's not enough space for me to sleep in Jerusalem. When everyone came by the 3 regalim to the Bet Hamikdash to bring their sacrifices, by the 3 holidays, no one said, oh, you know what, I'm going to go find a hotel somewhere in the north or somewhere in the Negev because there's no space in Jerusalem. This is all of Am Yisrael. We're all there in Yerushalayim. No one felt a lack of space. And this is the 10th miracle. What's really interesting, though, is that this Mishnah is telling us about the 10 miracles that we had from the Bet HaMikdash. And all of the other 9 are all speaking about miracles that were in the Bet HaMikdash. But this 10th one is speaking about something that has to do with Yerushalayim. And this is to indicate, it's to point to us that this 10th miracle, feeling the space, the openness, everyone feeling at home and everyone having where to live and where to stay and where to sleep in Yerushalayim, was a miracle that we experienced because of what the Bet HaMikdash represents. And what does the Bet HaMikdash represent? So now we want to understand what if the Arizal tells us that exile is experiencing tzara, being confined, and the redemption is shifting from that confinement, from that tzara to retzei, to having that willingness, to having that will, to having that openness, to being relaxed and having space and comfortable, and having space for your friends and having space for yourself, giving your own the space that you need, your own self, having space for the Torah. Sometimes a person learns Torah and he says, oh, I don't have the patience for that. So retzei represents patience. Patience, when you have that expanded consciousness, that expanded patience, then you can welcome and allow all of the Torah and all of the mitzvot. You can welcome and allow all your friends and have love for everyone, even if they're different than you. You can welcome and allow yourself to be that beingness that you are. And you can welcome and allow what's called constant dveikut in Hashem, experiencing Hashem constantly. Sometimes people feel at a certain point, oh, it's too much. That feeling of too much is a lack in ratzon, it's a lack in ritzeh, it's a lack in that patience. And it's something that we constantly increase, incrementally, from day to day. Every day we increase that level